Thank you all for coming. Very important day for all of us at YPNC, friends and family of our interns. My name is Tim Sullivan. I'm the Senior Director of Climate Resilience for the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council. I'm doing a poor imitation today of being Michelle Stewart. She is taking a deserved vacation. I know she's heartbroken that she couldn't be here today because this day, these presentations always mean a lot to her. She'll watch the recording of it, and just so the interns all know that she is there in spirit. I texted with her last night, and she's very sad that she couldn't join. So for those that haven't been at one of our intern presentations before, this is a culmination of a few months of work by our interns, and this is an extra special day because we also have presentations from two of our partner interns that have been working with our partner organizations and doing work here. Those partners being the Center for Western Weather and Water Extreme, CW3E, and Colorado Mountain College and Riley, working as that intern. And then very special, first time we've done this, sort of shared, but mostly led by the Routt County Wildfire Mitigation Council, Hadley Lavados, being able to present as well. So it's great that we're getting this cross-organizational engagement from our young and rising leaders in Routt County on critical issues that we all face. And I know you'll all find inspiration in the work they've done and feel better about the future. So I'm going to turn it over to the person who deserves all of the credit, or at least most of the credit, for making this program such a success. That's Dakota Dolan. Cody is amazing in the way she works with the interns, both in helping to select them, mentor them, bring them through, and have other partners come and engage with them. So Cody is responsible for really making the filling process, and that we continue to get such a great crop of new interns who can share their enthusiasm and experiences with all of us on the staff and with you in the community. So I'm gonna turn it over to Cody.
So thank you for that introduction. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled to see such a packed group. This is awesome. I'm really proud of this group. Summer, kind of like Tim mentioned, it's kind of a special time. We have our biggest group of interns in the summer. YVSC has the most events and kind of things happening to engage with. And we also get to work with our partner organizations and kind of collaborate with those interns as well. So summer is a really special time to be an intern, and I'm not picking favorites.
Around because you had it the other way around because.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. I don't care.
I think someone might need to mute their microphone. Just gonna add a note. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited for these interns to show you what they've been working hard at over the last 12 weeks. For those of you not familiar with the program, it's a 12-week professional experience that YVSC hosts every fall, spring, and summer. And it basically allows interns to work with a YVSC staff member, and together they work on a project concept that both meets the needs of YVSC at that time and also addresses that intern's skills and interests so that they can come together and create a unique, one-of-a-kind internship project. And all of those are rooted in one of YVSC's 5 priority areas, and those are waste diversion, energy, transportation, community engagement, and resilient land and water. So I think it's a very special program and provides a unique opportunity for interns to really engage with the community and with YVSC staff, as well as other agencies, organizations, and local government, et cetera. So I really hope you enjoy what they have to show you today. And one quick note, I know we're here from 12 to 3. Please help yourself to lunch. I'm not going to have any scheduled breaks, so please feel free to come and go, use the restroom, which is right around the corner, and please help yourself to lunch. So with that, I will start us off. We're going to start with Shea Speer. She was our intern working on the connections between art and the local community, as well as climate action. And she's just going to pass something out really quick, and then let's welcome her up to the podium. Yay, Sloan! And one other note, while Sloan is making her way up here, there will be a moment for questions and discussion after each presenter. So just hold on to your questions. And folks that are joining online, if you can type in your question, and then Abby will kindly help in projecting those to the room.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today and listening to our presentations. I'm Shea Speer, and I was the Forest Resilience intern with YPSC this summer. And my project is called Building Relationships with Regeneration. And it's about looking at reforestation through both the scientific lens, doing a bunch of like data collection, the regeneration surveys that Sloan was talking about, and then also through an artistic lens. I wrote and illustrated a picture book about the reforestation pipeline over the past couple of months, so that was a lot of fun. But first, a little bit about me. I've grown up in the Yampa Valley since I was 3 years old, and now I'm a senior at Steamboat Springs High School. I graduated with my Associates of Science degree from Colorado Mountain College last year. So that's kind of fun. And then I'm also a barista, but I'm a barista at Dusty Grouse Coffee, which is kind of my Walgreens. And I've been involved with YPSC for a really long time now. I was on the YPSC board as a sophomore and a freshman in high school, I believe. And that's kind of how I heard about this program, and I wanted to get involved with the internship for a while and like see YPSC from a whole new perspective. And so YPSC really got me interested in sustainability, but I kind of followed that path to this school in Maine called Maine Coast Semester at Chewonki. It's a semester-long school for high school students, and it kind of focuses on like sustainability and ecology. I got to meet a lot of wonderful people there, as you can see in those two photos. And it was very cold and very wet, but I got to do a bunch of field work and work on my art and stuff like that. So that's really inspired me to get involved again. Yeah. And then there we go. My staff mentor this summer has been Cody Dolan. She's one of the most thoughtful, organized people I have ever met in my whole life. She somehow manages both the Forest Resilience projects and also the internship program and goes above and beyond in like both of those programs, even though they both could take up like all of her time. It's amazing that you do both of them, and thank you so much for all of your support this summer. I've had so much fun. And I've worked with a lot of other people throughout the summer as well. I've talked to David Mucklow and Ada McCormick from the United States Forest Service. David is a tree climber and a trail manager, and then Aiden is a forester. And I got to talk to them about regeneration and their work with reforestation. And then also how the Forest Service is changing over the past couple of months under the new administration, and how we can kind of fill in those gaps as an organization. I also got to talk to Caitlin Martinez, who is a helper with the One Canopy Forest. She's with the, oh gosh, what is the organization? They're like a conservation nursery in Lowlands. They grow a bunch of trees that we use for our regeneration plantings. And then thank you also to Cody Dolan, Abby Vandergraaf, Jill Bergman, and Kate Mercado for all of your help with my picture book. It's been a lot of work to get it finished over the past like month. It's been kind of a rush, but we got it all done, and it's so exciting to have it finished and ready to share. And then thank you as well to all of the regeneration survey participants. I've had so much fun talking with you over all of the surveys and getting to look at all the beautiful wildflowers, eat wild raspberries. And I've had so much fun working with all of the interns as well, obviously. So a little bit of background first about Colorado's forests. They're super, super important to both our ecosystems and our communities. They provide a number of services, including regulating our watershed. They sequester the water over the springtime after the spring melt. And so they store the water over the summer when it gets really dry, because we get most of our precipitation in the wintertime. And then they let our rivers run clear and steady all year long. And they also sequester carbon, which is super important for our 2050 carbon neutrality goals. And they harbor biodiversity for a bunch of our wonderful species that characterize the Rocky Mountains. The problem, though, is that forests are becoming more susceptible to severe wildfire due to a combination of factors. First of all, climate change is making Colorado a lot hotter and drier. So our trees are becoming much more susceptible to pests like the mountain pine beetle. The pine beetle kills a bunch of trees, leaves a bunch of standing trees. And then because we've been suppressing fires for so many decades, our forests are growing super crowded, which means that when forests do start, they burn a lot more intensely and hotly, so that when the fire comes through, it will kill the seed bank in the soil, and then there will be nothing left to regenerate. And this is even worse because federal agencies like the United States Forest Service don't have many resources to support regeneration. Right now, under the current administration, the Forest Service focuses almost entirely on increasing timber production and not very much on restoration. And so we are not paying foresters to go out and plant trees, and we're not paying them to do regeneration surveys either. So what Yampa Valley Sustainability Council has kind of taken over that program, and we do all the regeneration surveys in Routt County now, which is a big burden to bear. And that's why we need so much community engagement in reforestation, because we need the volunteers on the ground and people funding YVSC to help with the reforestation efforts. And so that's really what my project focuses on, is increasing engagement in the reforestation work. So first, I wanted to collect data to understand how our burned areas are regenerating. We went to the Muddy Slide Fire burn scar and looked around to see what's growing back and what we can help with. And then I also analyzed and communicated patterns in regrowth using Excel to create different graphs that reflect patterns in regeneration. And then I would use those to educate a wide audience about the value of forest resilience, and that using also my picture book, which we're going to call Reforesting Hope. And Reforesting Hope is kind of a nonfiction picture book aimed at increasing community engagement in regen surveys by showing just how important it is to regrow our forests, but then also showing how people can help. It's like a way to create hope because you show the problem, but you don't just like thrust all of that awful information on people. You also show them ways to get involved and ways to support. Yeah. But my favorite part about this project was that I got to try on a bunch of different hats while fulfilling all of my objectives. Not one day of the internship looked alike, and it was very busy. First, I got to have a bunch of great conversations with foresters and with the people at the Conservation Nursery 1 canopy. But then I also got to do research in the field, hiking through burn scars. I got paid to eat wild raspberries and count trees, which is like a dream job right there. And then I also got to work with spreadsheets like this one, which was kind of a pain. It took a while to get to know Excel, I would say, but I learned a lot through that process and used a bunch of pivot tables to create graphs that we're going to talk about a lot later. And then alongside all of this research and science-based portions of the project, I painted and drew with like unprecedented consistency for myself. I spent the whole month of July painting and drawing the book. So for the first 2 weeks of July, I painted for like, I drew for like an hour and a half to 2 hours every day to kind of get the picture book rolling. And then for the second half of July, I filled in all of those inked drawings, and I was basically like knee deep in watercolors. But the thing was that I didn't get a desk until like last week. So I did most of my work sitting on the floor, like working on a chair as my desk. Or I would go to the river and work by the river or work at Budmore Memorial Library. So it was a lot of fun and definitely an adventure. So first, we're going to kind of follow the strand of the regeneration surveys, the more like sciencey half of the project. So buckle up, sorry, there's going to be a lot of graphs. But first, I participated in the 2025 surveys. These were from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Muddy Slide Fire burn scar, which is kind of down by Yampa. And I went on 6 survey days and 2 scouting days. During the scouting days, we would look at the roads, make sure there was no trees in the way. And then during the survey days, we would count trees, record site characteristics, and also just chat with volunteers. I got to meet a lot of people that way. And then I also analyzed the 2023 and 2024 surveys, which there was 1,886 data points total, thanks to all of the volunteers and the U.S. Forest Service people who have done it in the past. And these were at the Silver Creek Fire and the Big Red Park Fire burn scars. And I used those graphs to examine like the different characteristics that influence seedling regrowth. So we're going to go through those characteristics now and all of the graphs I made to kind of see what different patterns I found. So first, this is kind of the most basic graph. During the surveys, we would count the populations of pine, spruce, fir, and aspen seedlings that were above 1 foot and below 1 foot. And then we didn't count any trees taller than 5 feet because those were assumed to be there before the fire. As you can see with this graph, the lighter colored columns are the trees below 1 foot and the darker colored ones are above 1 foot. And this reflects the total seedling regeneration by species and by year. 2023 was from the Big Red Park Fire, and 2024 was from the Silver Creek Fire. And as we can see from both of these graphs, aspens regenerated the fastest. This makes sense because they're a pioneer species. They come back like straight after the fire occurs. And they regrow through vegetative reproduction, which means they sprout through their roots. They don't use seeds very often. So they can come back really, really quickly after the fire without waiting for the trees to recolonize the area. You can also see that the fir and the pine species come back fairly well. They're both pretty sun-tolerant pioneer species, but not quite as sun-tolerant as the aspens. And then spruce isn't regenerating as quickly as the other species, but that's not really a concern because they are not one of the pioneer species and they occur at a later stage of succession. They are not very sun tolerant, so they rely on the canopies of other trees to provide shade. And then the other thing that's important to note with this graph is you can kind of see the way that the 2023 graph mirrors the 2024 graph, such as how there's low spruce, there's a jump between the fir below a foot and above a foot, and then the even larger jump between the aspen below a foot and above a foot. And this kind of shows that even though the data collected was collected at different burn scars, the areas are experiencing similar regeneration. So these are trends that go beyond just one fire and one scar and go towards just regeneration in Routt County in general. So now we're just going to focus on trends from the 2024 graphs because they show very similar patterns, as you can see here, but they had more data points, so they're more accurate. So first, we're going to look at aspect. This is one of the first things you look at when you're on a regen survey. You just use a compass, see which way the slope is facing. And I would like to note that we're dealing in tenths of trees because I used an average seedling per plot here to get rid of skew. So there's not like tenths of trees hanging out on the regen surveys out there. There's all full trees, I swear. And so first we can see that pines and firs both prefer the north and western facing slopes, which is probably because they benefit from moist soil and also a little bit more shade during the day because these areas are cooler. Whereas aspens thrived in the southern and western facing slopes, which makes sense because they're extremely sun tolerant and they prefer drier conditions because they grow so fast and they have such wet wood that they want to avoid rot. And aspect doesn't really seem to influence spruce regeneration because it's just too sunny and too hot on all of the slopes, so they're just not coming back that fast. And then looking at slope and average seedling regeneration, this is measured using a clinometer and it's taken as a percentage and not a degree. And we can see a reduction in regeneration around 30% right around here. And this could be because more erosion occurs at the steeper slopes. So seeds and soil will be washed away and it's more difficult for seedlings to reestablish. But you will also notice that this graph deals in full trees and it's the total seedlings per plot. So there might be some skew in that more plots were surveyed below 30% because it's easier to access. Vegetation is not including trees, so it's all of the plants other than that, which often includes grasses, fireweed, which is a beautiful wildflower, some raspberries, and then many other wildflowers. And we looked at vegetation at survey sites to see whether it was not present or whether it was present at a light, moderate, or heavy level. And we can see that aspens and the few spruce trees that are on burn sites preferred the moderate or the heavy vegetation, where the pine preferred the light vegetation and the fir preferred the moderate. And this makes a lot of sense because vegetation creates shade. And so that's why the spruce trees grow back better there. It's they have their own little canopy, but the canopy is made of weeds and little wildflowers, whereas the aspen might have preferred the heavy vegetation because these areas were maybe slightly less severely burned. And so their root systems were intact and they could grow back and sucker from the roots more quickly. And then I think the lodgepole pines probably liked the lighter vegetation because they require more sun. And then looking at slash and average seedling regeneration, slash, first of all, for those who don't know, is the amount of downed trees in an area. You get to know it very well on regen surveys because you have to climb over it, which is really awful. It's like climbing gym. I'm not a fan, not a fan. But according to this graph, we can see that the lodgepoles and the aspens preferred the lighter slash, while the fir and spruce grew back more successfully in heavy slash. This could be partially due to the fact that slash increases soil retention and also increases shade in an area. So they kind of preferred that specific environment to grow back in, but it could also relate to burn severity because slash kind of signifies a more moderate burn severity because the fire didn't burn through and burn away all of the wood. It left some behind that will then remain as slash. And so less severe fires may not kill the seed bank in the soil. So the seeds of trees that are not serotinous, which is spruce and fir trees, are more likely to survive. And for context, serotinous means that trees' cones only open and release seeds at high temperatures during fire. And so trees with serotinous cones, like the lodgepole pine, rely on fire to distribute their seed, whereas seeds of trees like spruce and fir, their seeds are not designed for fire, and so they'll just burn up immediately. And then looking at percent exposed mineral soil, which is like the gray kind of latte colored soil surface revealed after organic layers are burned away. We can see that the pine trees preferred 20 to 50% exposed mineral soil, while spruce and fir trees preferred 0 to 25%. And aspen regeneration doesn't show a huge correlation with this particular characteristic. And this makes sense because exposed mineral soil may also correlate to burn severity. When there's more exposed mineral soil, it suggests that there was a higher burn severity because more of the topsoil was burned away. And so this is why the lodgepole pine kind of dominated after 25% exposed mineral soil, because these were the higher severity burns. And so that was the only seeds that could survive that kind of fire. And then these are our last graphs, I swear. But we can see very clear trends with overhead seed source and presence of cones versus regeneration. During a survey, volunteers would record whether there were living seed-bearing cones within 50 feet of the site you were on, and then that's overhead seed source. And then also whether they noticed cones on the ground. They could be like incinerated cones, like pretty open, pretty old, or new cones. And we can see a very clear correlation here. Basically, trees are much more likely to regenerate when nearby trees can introduce seed to the area and reproduce vegetatively, or when seeds are already present, which that makes a lot of sense logically. So yeah. Okay, that was like the sciencey branch of my project. And now we're gonna kind of take a big left turn and look at the picture book I created during this project. The picture book is called Reforesting Hope, Restoring Routt County's Forests After Fire. And it follows the reforestation pipeline. It's pretty nonfiction, but it tries to use art to engage the audience. And it's 20 pages long in black ink and watercolor. And the audience is steamboat locals of all ages. It has some more complex vocabulary, but I think it could be important to explain this vocabulary to younger readers, just to help them understand the issue and maybe get them interested in ecology. So yeah, and then the recipients for the book that I emailed included the libraries in town and all the schools in town, as well as Yampa and the United States Forest Service. And we're hoping to print this book and distribute it in the fall. We are currently going through a rebrand, so we didn't want to print it with the old brand and then be like, oops, can we replace your books now? Because that would be not very sustainable. So yeah. A little bit about my process for the book. At the beginning of the internship, I realized that I wanted to involve something more artistic and less sciencey to kind of balance it out. If you've read Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass, I kind of like to braid together the artistic side of sustainability with the more scientific side. So I noticed there was this need for resources about forest resilience that were not just super technical and hard to read. I learned a lot from the United States Forest Service website, but those resources are not very visual, they're not very engaging, and they're pretty inaccessible to early readers. So I wanted to create something that was better for everyone. So I did a bunch of online research and interviewed a tree climber, a forester, and also someone from a conservation nursery to kind of get a background in regeneration and how that process works. And then I drafted a page-by-page summary of the book in bullet points, like what I would say on each page, and drew thumbnail sketches of each page. If you guys want to pass them around. These are the thumbnail sketches, and then these are the painted versions. And so I did those, and then I spent the month of July, as we talked about before, illustrating the final pages of the book, which was a lot of work and very chaotic, but so much fun. And then I realized after I had finished all of these things that I had no title and no cover page, which was kind of an oversight on my part. So I pulled the YBSC staff over one of the staff meetings on what I should title the book, and then I finally created the cover. And with Jill Berkman's help and advice, I finally scanned the pages using my phone and completed final edits with Canva. And this is where I added the words and the acknowledgements and picturing regeneration page as well. So we're gonna read, let's see if this works. There we go. Okay, we're gonna read a couple pages of the book. We don't have time for all of it, but here we go. Reforesting Hope. It's 2100 and the forests are flourishing, but it took a lot of care to get here. Decades of fire suppression made forests crowded. Fuels accumulated and trees grew in dense stands that were more vulnerable to fire. Climate change made matters worse. Colorado became hotter and drier. Pests like the mountain pine beetle devastated forests. By the 21st century, Colorado's forests were ready to burn. All 20 of Colorado's 20 largest fires occurred between 2000 and 2025. Fuels accumulated and climate change worsened. Fires burned so hot they killed seeds in the soil. It would take decades for burned areas to grow back. Some may never become forests again. Fortunately, researchers, foresters, and volunteers have given the forest a jump start. And we don't have time to read all of it, so I'm just gonna click through the pages now, but. And these ones are spread, so they're like 2 pages, and you just 1/2 of the page at a time, but. Yeah. I have to get back to the other one. There we go. Awesome. So some of my other contributions to YVSC, it was so cool to just get involved in like all of the programs and see YVSC from a bunch of different lenses. But I got to go to the YVSC open house, which was super cool because I got to reconnect with a bunch of the board members who I hadn't talked to in a while. I also got to go to the EV ride and drive. I showed up to that expecting to like eat donuts and help sign people up to drive cars. And then it turned out that I got to learn how to drive a Chevy Bolt, which was super cool. I also volunteered with the Yampa Valley River Fest and did a tour of Bear Park. This is me and my sister eating strawberries at Bear Park. I love their permaculture program. It's super cool. And then I also did the beaver mitigation tour at Glass Defen Ranch. And most recently, this Wednesday, I went to the Yampa Valley Partnership for Students Stewardship and Sustainability's like sustainable skills workshop for educators, which was really fun because it was kind of like a role swap. Like it was me standing in front of a bunch of teachers telling them about my internship program and my experience here. And that was really interesting. And then I also attended staff meetings and went to the potluck and kickball. Oh, also, there's me beating Andrew at rock, paper, scissors. Moving forward with YVSC, I hope that my graphs are a useful resource on the YVSC website for anyone interested in ecological restoration. I think they could also be helpful to inform future data collection methods. It would be really nice to streamline the data collection process on surveys so that you can spend less time at each site and get more sites done. And then for my picture book, I hope that it's an educational resource for all ages in the Yampa Valley and kind of helps change our relationship with fire. It's really easy to feel very afraid about fire and like, when is it going to be us? It could happen next to the Yampa Valley, like what we're seeing in Meeker right now, especially this week with all the smoke. It's been crazy. But I would love to kind of change relationship with fire to show people like there are things we can be doing to help our forests and help them grow back even when catastrophe does strike. And then I'm also going to look into professional publishing, hopefully. I'm not sure how that's going to go, but it'll be an adventure. And then some of my personal takeaways from this project, I got to do a lot of environmental field work with Brenna and with Cody during regeneration surveys. It helps me realize that I do want to help like work outside in the future. I also got to talk with experts in forestry and tree climbing. Talking with David made me really, really want to get a certification in tree climbing so I can help with those in the future. That would be an awesome experience. I also got to create art in a professional setting for the first time. I've never gotten paid to make art before, and so it's super cool to see like what it's like to be a working artist and getting to do my work anywhere, including by the river or sitting on my floor working on a chair. But I also learned about nonprofit operations from the inside. I've gotten the view, like kind of bird's eye view as a board member before, but then like working from the ground up as an intern was really interesting. And then also getting to reconnect with the local sustainability community. I'm the head of the Eco Club at Steamboat Springs High School, so I would love to bring the connections I've made during this internship over to the high school to help uplift other students there. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
During this process, what gave you the most hope?
That's a good question. I think 2 things gave me the most hope. First, when we were on regen surveys and we were in areas that was like, the whole floor was like a carpet of lodgepole pine seedlings, and it was just crazy to see that much regrowth. So like seeing regrowth happen like in action, like without just being like, oh, they tell us the forests are coming back. They tell us that we're making these changes, but like seeing it on the ground was the first thing. And then the second thing was while I was working on my picture book, like at the library, I had a bunch of great conversations with like the most random library people being like, what are you doing? What are you working on? And just people's interest and like excitement about my project was really inspiring.
Surprised you most in this experience?
I would say I was surprised by how long watercolor takes. I was like, oh, it'll take 30 minutes a page, it'll be so fast. It was not fast. It took me like an hour to an hour and a half per page, which was a lot more work than I expected, but it was really fulfilling to finish the book and like get everything done. So.
Great job. It was great to see some of the data analysis because it's answering a lot of, it creates lots of other questions about it. So kind of the flip to what Brenna said is, did you see things out there that were the opposite of where weren't we seeing regeneration? And what are your biggest concerns about how well our forests are recovering without our direct help?
Yeah, there was definitely a few survey days where we would go out and we would see like 0 to like 3 trees per site, like every single site, which was really kind of hopeless feeling. But I would say like this was on some slopes, like mostly the like more exposed, like southern facing slopes are growing back much less quickly than the northern facing slopes are. So those might need more help with regeneration, or they might become like grasslands in the future if we don't replant them. So looking at that and seeing like the way things regenerate might not be the way they were before, but they will be alive in some capacity. So yeah.
I'm just gonna ask, because I know that conifers, when their cones are caught on fire, it helps to create a new sapling. Is there something similar that happens with aspen trees?
With aspens, they don't usually reproduce using seeds. Like they usually just use their like suckering, the vegetative reproduction.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think fire usually clears the area and like increases the nutrients in the soil, so that can help aspens regenerate. But I don't know that the fire like specifically impacts how they grow back, like in terms of burning their actual.
Okay.
Really good job. And did you find a difference between doing art for fun and doing art for a job? Like what was the big challenge there? Like
I would say doing art for a job requires a lot of persistence. So kudos to Jill for all of the persistence you have. But just like trying things, and then sometimes I would make a mistake and be like, I think I want to make this whole page again. And like realizing that sometimes it takes a lot longer than we're thinking it's gonna, but like it will happen. And like if you just keep working at it, it will get done. So I think persistence was the biggest.
No, it's just really wonderful to see your development since we met you 3 years ago on the board. And I'm just really impressed. And I think you've got a good input to your college. The work you've done. I think it's remarkable, really. I think you did a great job.
Thank you so much.
There's maybe a future opportunity. I was struck by the combination of the sciencey part you presented, the graphs and the artwork. And there are jobs out there that already exist where people work full-time to sort of translate very sciencey, very complex science information about research into healthcare or a variety of things, and put it in terms that the layman can understand. As I was watching you, I was thinking, I wonder if there are people out there who can take that another step further and translate it visual. I will assume there are some of those kinds of things, but we all need that because they say a picture speaks 1,000 words, but then all the dots don't, if you don't understand the science, and you're stuck trying to figure out what's the Y on the X-axis and all that. But if that can be translated into images that the layman could understand, that would add tremendous value. So that's just a thought, not a question.
To add to that comment, it's not really a question, but I will say as someone who's been involved in the schools with science education for a long time, science literacy in public schools is not on an upward trend at the moment. But I will say that the tools that you've created here are extremely important if we're going to continue on that trend, which everybody hopes we don't. But it's going to be one way in a toolbox, one tool in a toolbox that's going to help kids build their science literacy. And I don't have to talk to this choir about how important that is, but I'm really impressed.
Any other questions?
It looks like the regeneration surveys you've done are looking at natural regeneration. How's your data or the information you gathered inform maybe, I guess, us actually going out and specifically doing restoration?
Yeah, so our, data that the graphs that I created more inform future data collection methods, but also we could, instead of doing regeneration surveys, just look at areas using drones or using satellite imagery, and just being this slope faces south, so it won't have this many trees growing on it, or looking at things from above instead of being completely on the field. And that could help increase the speed of deciding where we do need to replant. So using data that way and understanding the trends.
Thank you.
Great, well, thank you so much.